So, um, once you have started blocking out your shape, one thing that I usually find handy to do first is to think about um, physical properties of your fabrics. Because if you sometimes it is handy to use the strengthening tool to avoid a little bit of a collusion. But sometimes it can give this very puffery feeling on your garments, and everything feels like rubber. So you know the physical properties are there for a reason. So they're really going to make a distinction between different fabrics, and that also creates a little bit of a layer of a realism. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to speed up my screen, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be choosing different fabric properties for different, different fabrics. For example, maybe I want to have this one like a nylon, or maybe this one could be perhaps leather, so that they would behave a little bit different from each other. So if you also have a garment that has a certain feel, for example, on a blazer, and then the pants are the same material, but they are not quite following the same, you can also tweak the physical properties in order to get the feel that you want. The whole idea is that you use references, so garments, pictures of garments, and also garments that you're wearing or someone on the street, to really recreate that visualization, that feel, the look and feel that the garment can give to you. So I'm going to change a couple of garments in here. So for example, this one, I'm going to add the perhaps nylon, and I will put random colors for now, and then this is not going to be a texturing tutorial. I'm just going to show you how I follow up this process, and the texturing is going to be in the last video of this series. So now I'm going to change the color so I can identify what is what. So maybe I'm going to put this one tone blue, and then I drag and drop. So this one has 2 layers. Then if you see, it is in nylon. So if I'm going to simulate now, of course, it's going to be simulated with the default fabric, but I'm going to choose here perhaps nylon. Say this one was quite thin. So both fabrics are going to be with the same properties. Another thing to consider, that in case you have used the Glow Kit or any other measuring tool, you can open here and you can choose any physical property that you have measured yourself. So if, for example, if you have scanned your fabric and if you want to plug it here, that's the place where you want to have your physical property. One thing to mention is that the thickness of the fabric in here does not influence what you see. This is about the physical property itself. So for example, you also want to have a fabric, I chose muslin, which is wrong. I'm going to put here nylon. Featherweight, yeah, that's what I want. So this is the thickness of my fabric, and this is actually not accurate because it is not 3 millimeters, but anyways, it is a number as a factor. And if you want to have a fabric that behaves in a certain way, for example, wool, but then you want to have the lightness of cashmere, then you can change the thickness in here. And if you want to have a wool which is a bit thicker, maybe perhaps with alpaca, which is a bit heavier, that falls a little bit differently, then you can change here and you make the thickness a little bit greater. So that's what it's about. Nothing to do with the visualization. So now if I simulate my fabric, you're going to see that, it's going to behave in a different way. So now I'm going to speed it up and change, all of my fabrics until I get the look and feel that I want, and I will be back. Now that I have added all the colors, I'm simulating with the different fabric properties, and now you can see how my fabrics fall in a different way. Yeah, so sometimes you have to make some adjustments, and there will be some collision problems like you see here, but just give it a time. And sometimes if you make that strengthen, simulate, and then afterwards simulate again, things will happen fine. The thinner the fabric, the more problematic it is with the collision. Yeah, so sometimes you have to be patient. Okay, so now I have my color coding, different fabric properties. I also use it for me afterwards to recognize which part is which. So this will be fine for now. Now, what I would like to talk about is about the fabric thickness. So as you can see by default, see this one. Once you see this view here in close, so you have the thick texture surface, the monochrome, so there's like almost like a paper, yeah. And this is going to be the texture surface, so there is only a color. And this one is going to show you if there is any thickness or not. So first I'm going to click on the thickness, and you can see here, there is a little bit of thickness in this fabric. And maybe see, let me just take one that does not have, like for example, this one, the pink one. There is absolutely no thickness in here, which means that once you're going to render this, it's going to be infinitely thin, and that is impossible. So even a knife has a certain thickness. So even if you're dealing with a very thin organza, I would always recommend you to put thickness on your fabrics, because that is really going to help you to generate realism. Of course, if everything is tucked in, you don't see it, but most of the times, especially when you have raw edges like I have here, you need to put thickness on your fabric. And also it helps to give a certain body, and it helps to create also shadows that will make your garment look nicer. So and again, because I have so many different fabrics, it would be nice as well to have different types of thickness in here. For example, this rib, maybe it could be thicker. Yeah, so this has nothing to do with the fabric. This has to do with the pattern piece. So sometimes you can, for example, I have here the same fabric assigned to different pattern pieces. I can make this thicker and this one a bit thinner. So I'm going to do that now. For example, here I select this rib, and then you go under the property editor, under rendering, and here you can add your thickness. I'm going to put here 1 to exaggerate a little bit, and so you can see how it's going to look like. So this is with 1. So you see it's much thicker. And if you want to deal with a fabric which is very thin, like for example this one, the collision, the rendering thickness is 0. I'm going to here 0.3. Yeah, so it's just slightly thicker, but it really helps to help with the realism. So sometimes, let me just take one fabric here. Maybe let me take this strap. Yeah. So sometimes, if you add a certain thickness on your fabric, especially in resin, it is interesting to think about a different size of a fabric. Like for example, right now, once I assign a fabric into a pattern piece, the same fabric is assigned to the front, to the side, and to the back. Now, right now, I don't have a side because I don't have thickness rendering, but I'm going to put here 2, which made significantly thicker. And as you can see here, everything is the same fabric. But if you selected the fabric, see here, which is going to be the strap fabric, the material by default, the front, the back, and the side is going to be the same. So you can also assign a different material for the back. For example, here, the back, I would like to have different color. Yeah, so now you see it's a different color, not physical property. Yeah, comparing with the back and the side. And if you want to make something on the side, you can also do that with, see again, here on the side, you untick that box. Now, if I make side a different color. So now you can see you have a strap with three materials. So the front, side, and the back. So this particular one I'm going to make in leather. And then afterwards you can see how it looks when it's textured. And this one I'm also going to make the same thickness, which was 2. Okay, so now I'm going to proceed to change my textures, and I will be back with changing some geometry. Another thing to note is also that zippers also have a physical property. So for example, once you click on the zipper, as you applied, you can also go into its physical property. So right now here, I put a denim wall because I would like to have a quite stiff zipper. And for example, if I have this one, it's by default the default fabric from Glow. But then you can also change, for example, I would like to have here cotton. Yeah, maybe it's, yes. So that's exactly the same as the fabric. So now if you see, the physical properties also apply to the zipper. So if you have a zipper, which you want the zipper to be very stiff, then just choose stiff materials that has no stretch on them. Collusion is also something important to consider. By default, once you click on your avatar, by default, you have a collusion of a skin offset of 3, which means right now I don't have so much issues with this mask, but the mask is not really touching the skin of the avatar. And that is a little bit of a protection, because if you get too close, it can also have problems with collision. But if you are dealing with bra or spaghetti straps around the shoulders, and if you really see that the garment looks like it's floating around the avatar, you can decrease this number. So for example, now I'm going to put 1, and I'm going to simulate, and you're going to see that the garment will get closer to the avatar. Yeah. So you also have collision within fabrics itself. So I'm just going to go back. I'm going to click to 3. You also have collision within fabrics itself. So and pattern pieces. So for example, if you want a pattern piece to have really be touching to each other, you can diminish that collision. So by default, it's 2.5, but very rarely you're going to put that lower. Again, because you might have issue with collision. So another point to mention here is the regarding the properties of the fabrics is bonding or skiving. So that is interesting because right now I don't have a garment that requires so much bonding, but in case you have a blazer or a top that really wants to make your fabric stiffer, almost like you have a fusible underneath it, you don't change the physical property, you just add a fusible, exactly how you would be doing in real life. For example, I'm going to do this piece here so you can see the effect. You click on the pattern piece, and then you go here under bond and sky, and you enable the bond. And there you can choose the physical properties of this bonding. So of course you can also add your own, but here they have some interesting defaults. So for example, I'm going to put here the undercolor, and I'll simulate. It gives a little bit of a orange haze. So you can see that fabric, become a bit stiffer. Now, the opposite of bonding is the skiving. So what skiving does, I'm going to disable this one, and I'm going to simulate again so you see how the fabric used to be. What skiving does is almost make the fabric thinner. So it's not really changing the physical property, but it's really emphasizing the drape of the fabric. So that's very interesting. So sometimes you need that effect. So I'm going to click on here, and then you can see, okay, if it is 100%, and it's going to drape in a different way. And then you can make that less. and see that it's falling in a different way. Yeah. So especially when you have skirts which are draping, it's interesting to use this effect. Yeah. Um, Another thing that you can also play with is so the solidify tool is very interesting because it almost creates an effect of a starched fabric. It's still a flexible fabric, but it keeps its shape. So it's very interesting. For example, if you have a jeans and if you have a couple of drapes in the back of the knee, and if you want to solidify that part, if you want to, okay, once you're animating your garment, that part is really still holds in its shape. It's interesting to use the solidify. However, if you use the solidify, you are going to solidify the whole pattern piece. Yeah. But there is a way though that you can solidify a portion of your pattern piece. And I'm going to show that now. And then it comes with the brush tool. So, but before I go back to the solidify, I would like to show you first how to change the geometry of your garments. So sometimes you have a very big hoop skirt and, with a lot of fabrics, a lot of material. And if you're going to put every single thing to 5, that's going to be very difficult, especially when you're dealing with animation. It's important that you be very strategic about how much geometry you use. So I'm going to show here, this is me showing how much geometry I have. So if you can see here, the smaller pattern pieces, I put, more geometry. Like for example, this one is 5. This one is even lower, which is 2. But then there are some pieces which are quite large. So the particle distance is a bit 20. It's important for you to notice that depending of the effects you want to create, you can also add the geometry only on the parts that you really need. For example, here on the sleeve. Yeah, so it's quite a big piece, this piece here. And if I'm going to add geometry, like now it is a 10, I think, yes, it is a 10. And if I'm going to add to make it into a 5, yes, I'm going to have a nicer drape. However, it's going to slow down significantly. So what I'm going to do now is only going to add geometry on this portion of the sleeve, which is where it's gathering. So you can use a brush tool here. So select mesh. And if you click a little bit, you can select with a pin box, lasso, but what you want to do is the select mesh brush. So here it comes with a strength, the size, and the focal, how big the focal of your brush is. So right now, I can increase or decrease the size, and I can make less or not strength. So here I would like to select this portion. So I'm going to only select this portion here of my pattern piece, and then right click and subdivide. And that's it. So now if you see my geometry, you can see I added geometry only on this portion. So that is very interesting to keep the polygon counts to a minimal amount, especially when dealing with complex garments and a huge amount of polygons. It's going to slow down everything. So now if I'm going to simulate, you're going to see that's going to give me a softer geometry in here. See? So, and of course, what you want for visualization is to add creases. Another way to create geometry is by adding internal lines. As you can see here, here, it's a little bit blocky. Yeah, so this is going to be this part. And if you noticed here on this drawing, in this, every time in this pattern piece, every time that you add an internal line, that internal line is going to change the geometry. So as you can see here, now they are, all aligned around this line. So if I'm going to add one here, it's really going to change the whole geometry. And that changing of geometry is going to help make this curve softer. Yeah. So I'm going to get closer here so you can see. And if I'm going to add, right, down offset as internal line, I'm going to put increments of 0.3, and I want to do in both sides. In this case, I can add a couple. This is not adding geometry. The only thing that is doing is changing the position of the polygons. And that already is going to help soften this curve. So as you can see here as well. Yeah, so it really helped think, okay, you have to curve this way. Yeah, so now it's, if you see my polygons here, they're a bit better. And of course, this is way too big. I'm going to put here 10. Simulate, and you're going to see that's going to help quite a lot. See, now it's much softer. Another way to the fake the geometry is by use a double-faced material. So for example, let me take a part that could be double. Or could be this, yeah? So this is a single piece of fabric. But let's suppose I would like to have this double. Now, especially because it is a strap, it's going to be very difficult. One more piece of fabric, geometry, and if I'm going to animate this, this is going to be jumping around. So if you select that pattern piece, you can go into here and you can make it double-sided. What it's doing is going to give an illusion that there are two materials in there, but that's not going to increase the geometry. So if you are dealing with a facing that you really want to show the facing, but you don't want to add another piece of fabric, you can also do that. However, sometimes, especially when you have a facing of a blazer, the facing underneath it is a bit bigger. It's going to hug the front panel in a way that you need to add internal lines to make that look more realistic. So it does not work for everything, but for flat pattern pieces like this one, that's quite a good solution. Yeah. So that is also an option. Also, what you can do with the brush too. So here, so I suppose I like this crease that I created here. Can also select with my brush tool and right click and solidify. What it's going to do is only going to solidify that aspect. So if I would have a dress and then in a certain part of the fabric there is some kind of a draping, and once I animate, that part is going to go back, almost like a memory. It's going to go back to the original shape, which is very interesting. Another thing that you can do is also strengthen a certain part of your fabric as well. So for example, if I want to select this part in here, right click, you can also strengthen only that part. So that's not what I want, but it's also possible. So now we talked about the main things that you can do to help with the fabric properties, and now we are going to talk about seams. So now we are going to talk about seams. Well, the seams are a very, very important aspect of the visualization because you can really, make something look very realistic only with the seams. And it's actually very interesting because you are almost like modeling slash sculpting a fabric, which is also very interesting. So if you see this, maybe this is not the best one. Let's see, a seam. So many little pieces. Okay, so here between those two fabrics, this is not, in 3D world, this is not really a seam. So those are just two parts of two polygons stitched together through, putting those vertices aligned to each other. So once you're going to bring this back into Blender, you are not going to see the seam. So it's very important to know this, that you have to create a seam yourself. I'm going to bring this into Blender to show you the difference with, the seams and playing with the internal lines, and without, you can see the difference. And there you go. I have my mesh here. And as you can see, there is not really a seam. Yeah, so it gives an illusion of the seam because of the normal. So the normal is really going to help you fake the whole illusion of seams. So this is a very important aspect, and that's very important aspect. And if you understand that, and if you know how to manipulate, that's going to really help you how to make something look, more realistic or not. Now you can see here, this is a jeans that I have done in Clo, and you can see here, I did not play that much with the, internal lines here. However, I have done a lot of work doing, making a normal, which is going to create that illusion of seams for me. So now I'm going to show you how this looks like the normal on. So there is no color here, only the normal. So as you can see here, the normal is going to give you the illusion not only from the fabric, but also from the seams, and also from the depth of the seams, but also the top stitching. So all of this, the work is being generated by the normal. And as you have studied before, the normal, it gives the illusion of the height, which means that you can have a material which is a low poly, a low polygon count mesh, but still have illusion that there is a lot of geometry in here. So, and that is something that is very important. So it's actually you're painting with normals. So having a very good normal is essential, and understanding what the normals do, it's something that really can help you to generate this better. This is an interesting graph where it really shows you, okay, this is the height map and this is the normal map. So to generate this, you really need to sculpt all of this. And it means that the more detail, the more geometry you need, the longer it's going to take to simulate and to generate and to animate and to render. So the height map is always a black and white map. However, you always need particle distance / geometry in order to make that elevation happen. So it's usually from 0 to 1, and black being 0, and 1 is going to be white. So you can see here that this height map is having a slightly elevation, so it's really, it's not sharp. It always should be a little bit like blurry, which means that it's going to have this smooth elevation into the highest top of this height map. The normal map is going to do the same thing, but then this does not require any geometry. So this could be a polygon with 4 vertices, and you still can have this illusion of a map. However, when you turn it to the side at a certain angle, you see that there is a flat, mesh over there. However, this is very interesting for fabrics and for gaming. And if you understand that concept, and if you understand how to paint using this map, that's very interesting. And you see as well that there is a certain coloring. And those height maps, you can also generate them from a height map to a normal map using Photoshop. There is a plugin, there is a filter called Generate Bump. And there you can also flip or generate your map in case you have only the black and white map. Hi. Well, we are going to start with seams, but before that, I would like to show some things about reference. So looking at the reference, it's very important to understand where to add the seam, where to add the top stitching, and where to add seam allowance, and etc. So, of course, it's very difficult, like drawing, to do it from your head, from your memory. So like with anything we do, it's always good to look for references. So to pin down some references close to your screen, you can of course use the graphic tool in here, but the thing is, every time that you add something in Clo, you are adding more things to render. So if you have your garment in here that you're rendering, that you're simulating, and it's quite heavy, and if you add here a quite large image, it's a little bit complicated. So you can use Pure Reef. So I'm show you here. It's called Pure Reef. Yes, it's a free website, and you can download on your computer. You can here put custom amount 0 if you want to, unless you want to donate something, and you can download this for free. And it's very interesting because it's a pin board, so you can pin somewhere close to your screen, and whatever you open, that screen won't stay now open. So for example, here I have it here at top, so I'm going to drag an image that I want to drag in here, and then I can make almost like collage, make it smaller if I want to, and then with right click you can use the settings, and with a Control W you can lock that screen, and then now whatever you work, that screen is going to be locked. So have a look. It is quite simple to use. You can have a look on the internet how to use it. I'm not going to use it at the moment because it's going to be quite a lot on my screen to record. So talking about reference, it's important to have a look at some sources. So of course you can look at Vogue. They have quite a good close-up of the garments. So you can really see the detailing, and especially when you get closer, you can see, okay, see here, there's kind of a hook and eye, and etc. So it's interesting to see as well here. There's a kind of a shadow of a hem, and you see how the garments were constructed. Besides Vogue, if you want to look for young independent designers and see something a little bit more outside the box, you can have a look at the vanilla issue. Here you don't have so many close-up images, but it's interesting to see how can you make detailing a little bit more in an innovative way. So that is also an interesting look. For very interesting close-ups as well, you can have a look at the net-a-porter. They have a very good pictures of garments that you can see as well as a reference, how much puckering, how much top stitching, how thick is the yarn, what is the distance between the top stitching, when it is top stitched or not. So you can see a reference of garments here. They have very good pictures on the body as well. So you can also study a little bit where the creases are, and how can you afterwards apply them on Substance Painter, but also in Clo. And very interesting as well, you can also study the scale of textures, and also for example here there's a bar tag, and what the difference between a top stitching on a pants or on a bag. So you can really study the garments and see how can you apply finishings to your garments. Besides net-a-porter, one interesting is Carrie Taylor auctions. This one you need to make an account. It is for free though, but yeah, if you don't want to make an account, if you don't want to give your email, you don't have to do this. But it's a very interesting website where you can see close-up of historical garments. And you also have current and modern garments. And here they have extremely good images and close-up of garments, like for example this one. And you can also give even closer. You can even get a close-up of those little details. This garment, for example, is from the 20s. And then you can click on the type of auction and which year do you want to see. For example, let's see something from the 70s in here. And then you can see here, there are a couple of garments, and you can really see all the details. So it's very interesting websites to also study different ways and vintage ways to apply finishings to your garments. Perhaps you can combine the new and the old and learn from each other. Last but not least, it's another website. It's called Auto Archive, and it's a website where they have rare pieces. So really, they don't have extremely close-ups, but I think they are good enough to see interesting textiles, finishings, buttons, and zippers, and etc. So it's very interesting to see as well those garments that we see on a runway laid it up with with a lot of styling. And here you can see them close up and on a regular model, and you can see how those finishings were